Hey, I'm Moses. This is Maddie with the PropMedia Podcast. And we're excited to welcome Michael Smith, broker in charge for Bluefield Realty Group in South Carolina, to the podcast. He is Inc. 5000. It's a fast-growing independent brokerage. And we're excited to talk with him about how his brokerage uses photography, video, all kinds of services, and go over a checklist of what has to get done before listing, all that stuff, and give some insight how photographers, realtors, and brokers can work together in the best possible way. Michael, welcome, and tell us a little bit about you. You're an independent broker in South Carolina. Tell us about that journey quickly of what does that look like starting your own brokerage, and how has Bluefield grown?
Yeah, so we started the brokerage a little over 6 years ago, with an office here in Greenville,
You got some nice
and
plaques back there.
yeah, I appreciate that. We actually just got our fourth Inc. 5000 ranking. We're pretty excited about that. So we started back in 2019 with just 5 real estate agents, and over the last 6 years, we've grown to over 200 real estate agents with about 25 staff members to support those agents. We also do property management. We have an insurance agency as well. So we provide a handful of different services there to our clients. We're licensed in 3 different states: North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. We've got an office in Spartanburg. We're about to open a 3rd office in Columbia. So we've been growing quickly, and it's been a lot of fun.
Congrats. Well, we're excited to talk with you about
Thank you.
how you interact with real estate media and prop media. Cool. Let's dive into a first topic. So you're the first broker we've had on the podcast. So I'd love to just get some general insights from you of how you interact with your agents and how you encourage them between do-it-yourself photography options, hiring a professional, that sort of thing. How do you think about that for your brokerage?
We strongly encourage our agents to use professional media, whether it's photography, videography, et cetera. I think it's kind of a no-brainer when you look at the cost-benefit analysis. If you have an agent that's doing like DIY cell phone photography on a listing, in my opinion, you're saving maybe a few $100, but you're really shooting yourself in the foot because professional media isn't just about advertising that particular listing. That's certainly part of it, but you're also advertising yourself. You're building your reputation, and we try to encourage our agents that as well. Every time you take a listing, that's an opportunity for you to market yourself, not just that particular house. And you want to be presenting yourself in the best possible light, not just the house that you have listed. So you want to build a reputation of somebody that does go the extra mile and uses professional media, has, not just great pictures, but also great, well thought out listing descriptions, and taking that extra step and doing like drone videography, things like that. We do strongly encourage that. Now, obviously, our agents are independent contractors, and we don't require them, to do video and drone and Matterport, whole 9 yards. But we have developed a policy internally where you do have to use professional photography at a minimum, just because if we have a bunch of listings out there with DIY cell phone photos, it's just not a good look for the company.
Yeah, so that it kind of impacts your brand across all your hundreds of agents.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's more than just it's actually a requirement in your brokerage to use professional photography. Not a particular photographer, but just some professional photographer that isn't the realtor with their cell phone. How do you frame that with your agents?
Correct.
Do you ever have any pushback?
Yes. No, we've had a couple agents that have joined and just maybe weren't aware of that policy. We probably need to do a better job of including that really in our onboarding process to make sure. We've had it slip through the cracks a couple times, and someone will bring it to my attention.
Sure.
But usually it's a pretty easy conversation because, we don't just say you have to do it. We explain the why behind it, and once you explain it, the agents get it. Typically, I see agents try to get away with it on like the low dollar listings, if they have a piece of land or like a rundown house that's, 50 grand, 75 grand, they'll think, oh, I can just slap up some cell phone photos and, save a little bit of money. But, spending a little bit of extra money, even on a low dollar listing is going to go a long way just to solidify, your brand. Because when people are considering selling a house, the first thing they typically do is they go online, they start, researching, whether that's Google or Zillow or realtor.com or whatever. But, typically sellers will start off just browsing to see what's available so they can get an idea of what their home is worth. And, if they come across one of your listings and the photos look bad, they're not going to be calling you to list their house.
Yeah. It's kind of the worst possible foot forward um, if they're thinking
Yeah.
about putting their house on the internet. It,
Yeah. And it's just short-sighted, because it's typically, okay, I'm going to save $150 or whatever, and just take the photos myself. But it's totally worth it to use a professional.
do you still list yourself, or do you just are you not competing with your agents?
So I'll still do, yeah, I mean, I'll do a few transactions a year just with like friends and family, just things that fall in my lap.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think I did any listings last year, maybe one or two, but I've actually had like three or four this year, just kind of through happenstance. But when we opened the brokerage about 6 years ago, I stopped, actively seeking clients.
So talk to me. You could think about back when you were listing more heavily, or you could take a perspective from one of your agents. Like, how do you guys think about decisions with a real estate photographer? So you require your agents to use a real estate photographer. And how would you
Mhm.
counsel an agent or make a decision yourself about when you're going to do more than just photos? You're going to go for a video, you're going to go for a Matterport, you're going to go for a 3D rendering, whatever it is. Like, how do you think through that?
So I think it's gonna vary based on the situation. So thinking back to when I was like a brand new agent, that's one of the things that I used as a value proposition on my listing appointments to set myself apart.
So that was like
A lot.
1932 or yeah.
Yeah, so back in 2016, so 2016, 2017, 2018, um, I would personally do as much media as I could on every single listing. I think a lot of agents, they will go for the professional photography on every listing, and then if it's above a certain price range,
Yeah.
that's when they'll start doing additional things. Typically when we see the luxury listings, that's when agents feel comfortable shelling out more money, and they think of it as, well, I'm going to earn more commission so I can afford to do this. But for me, it was always about building my brand and getting some experience and getting, a track record. So my first couple years when I was an agent, that's one of the things that I did on every single listing was, I would do drone photos, I would do videos, and to me it was just, I'm a brand new agent, I'm trying to get some experience. The most important thing is getting the listing and getting the transaction, not necessarily how can I squeeze an extra couple $100 out of this deal.
Yeah.
Because if you do a great job and the sellers are impressed and you get referrals, I mean, it's going to pay for itself multiple times over. So that was my philosophy, personally, when I first got started was, hey, I'm a new agent. I haven't really done any listings or done many listings. So this is one of the things that I can do to set myself apart. Number one, to make it more likely that I get the listing, because I talk about it up front during my presentation. This is what I'm going to do to market your house. But then also make it more likely to get referrals and more organic clientele just from people seeing my listings and reaching out to me. So that was my philosophy. So I think in general, that's probably the way agents should think about it, is it's an investment. Again, it comes back to, the media is not just about marketing that particular house, it's about marketing yourself. So I think if you're an agent who's actively wanting to grow your business and sell more houses, this is one of those levers you can pull to increase your conversion rate on listing appointments, and to increase, the number of times that a listing will turn into another opportunity through good branding.
So at this point, I mean, you broker for lots of top agents. Do you see any commonalities? Like, you're describing your own philosophy. Like, you sprung for a lot of listings, lost a lot of listing media, and grew your brand that way. What commonalities do you see with other top performing agents in your brokerages? How they think about media and the like photography and videography choices they make?
Yeah, I think, the top agents, from my perspective, tend to be more comfortable spending more money to get additional add-ons. And you could say, well, is that a chicken or the egg? Are they spending that money because they're top agents and they have the money to do it,
Right.
or are they top agents because they behave like that? And I guess you can't really tell for sure, but I see that in other aspects too. Like, a lot of our top agents sometimes are the ones that show up to all the training classes, even though they're already
Yep.
successful. And you can make the case, well, they're successful because they have a learning mindset and because they do those types of things, not vice versa. Um, but one of the things I see a lot is typically, an agent that does well and has a good number of listings, they want to find like that go-to photographer. Just like agents will have a go-to lender, go-to home inspector, go-to attorney. A photographer is just one of those vendor relationships that you need to have, in your back pocket. So it's good to have that relationship and have a photographer that you send a lot of business to. That way, if you're on a listing appointment and you've got someone who really wants to hit the market soon, you can say, look, I can call my photographer right now, or text them, whatever, and see if they can, slip us in, on short notice, based on the situation. So I think just having that consistency of, your go-to photographer that you typically use, but it's good to have other options as well in case your go-to person is booked up or unavailable or out of town or whatever. So it's always good to have options.
Yeah. Well, I mean, nowadays they can just get on PropMedia and find another one, but
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
yesterday.
Yeah.
So in your mind, like, let's talk about that relationship. So you're pointing out that having that relationship with a great photographer that you can call to squeeze in to win a listing. Like sometimes, like I've felt that taking listings, like the homeowner has expectations and you got to deliver and you got to string together vendors and that sort of a thing. So that relationship to get that done is huge. What other things create a sticky relationship between you or your agents and particular photographers?
So I think there's a few variables that are important. Number one is, communication and flexibility, being able to schedule quickly. Um, Obviously, quality is really important. It doesn't matter how cheap your photographer is or how available they are, how quickly they can turn around and edit. If their photos aren't good, you're not going to use them. So, quality is important, and I would say consistency of quality is really important. So, making sure that your photographer is turning out quality photos every single time, and are they I don't know what their back end process looks like for editing, but if you've got a photographer where one out of every five shoots it just doesn't look right, that's problematic for sure. So making sure that you're working with someone who has a consistent standard of quality that they adhere to is really important. But other things too, like turnaround times are super important. You don't want someone going out today and taking photos and it's going to be 3-4 business days before you get the files back. I think in today's world that's just unacceptable.
Yeah. What do you look for there in particular on turnaround time? Like what's peak for you?
Yeah, I think most people nowadays expect like next day turnaround. So if a photographer's out here today, I would like my files tomorrow. I think that's pretty standard for, what a realtor expects nowadays.
What's the top reason that you would ditch a photographer and find a new one?
Probably a decline in quality.
Okay.
So if there's a photographer that, for whatever reason, is just not giving me quality product like they used to, that's probably the number one reason that would cause us to make a switch. Um, or just scheduling gets more difficult, and that is a challenge with vendors in general, not just photographers, but any vendor that you work with. As someone who is good is probably going to get busy. If you're doing a great job as a photographer, you should be getting more clients, right? You should be getting more shoots. And so as you get busier, sometimes your turnaround times can suffer. And so maybe you start working with a photographer at first, they can always get you in next day and do next day turnaround on editing. But, because they're so good, everybody wants to use them. And next thing you know, it takes a week to get on their calendar, and they're a couple days on editing. So that's definitely problematic, but that's, the nature of the beast. If you're, uh, like a solopreneur, if you're doing it all by yourself and you don't have, assistance with scheduling and editing and different things like that. So that's a challenge, but that's not just specific to photographers. That's with any vendor.
Yeah. That precious vendor list that realtors
Yeah.
are prone to keep to themselves.
Obviously, we work with a lot of photographers and media companies. And I think those photographers, they work with realtors. They've got a very kind of one-sided look at your businesses. Maybe give us some idea of what are the things that you wish photographers knew that would actually help, that media would actually help your business?
So I think something that most real estate agents are looking for, even if they're not necessarily articulating it, is convenience. So being able to schedule online, without having to call or text, that's super important. If I can just go on the website and there's availability and I can book a day or time, being able to go to one person for everything, uh, you know, photos, videos, drone, floor plans, measuring, the whole nine yards, putting the sign in the yard, taking the sign out. Like the more services that you can bundle together so that I'm not having to go to two or three different vendors, I can just go to this one person. I know they can take care of everything that I need to get a property listed. I think that's definitely an opportunity that a lot of photographers miss out on. And we have photographers that reach out to us and they want to schedule lunch and learns and they want to come talk to our agents and things like that. And a lot of the photographers don't offer those extra things, like measuring the house, providing floor plans, putting your sign in the yard, stuff like that. So anything you can do to make yourself a one-stop shop and make it more convenient, make it easier for the agent to do business with you, I think that's going to go a long way.
Where do you think the line is? I think a lot of photographers, they are very strict about like, I want to just do media. I'm a camera professional, like
there's different business models, right? And there's particularly in artist veins, there's a desire, like I want to be really good at one thing, which can be a great business model. But then you're saying, and I think a lot of photographers gravitate that way, right?
Yeah.
But you're saying almost the opposite. They've got to be good at the photos, but then those other pieces are pretty meaningful.
And even if you sub it out, I mean, you don't have to be the one doing everything, but if you're the face of it, like if I can call Moses and Moses is my guy, and I know that I'm going to get quality photos, I'm going to get drone, I'm going to get video, I'm going to get measurements, I'm going to get a floor plan, I'm going to get a sign in the yard. I don't care if Moses is the guy actually sticking the sign in the yard. I just don't want to have to call 3 different people,
Yeah. In fact, Moses definitely subs out the sign in the yard.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what's important is the outcome.
Yeah.
How the outcome is delivered doesn't really matter. So if you can be a one-stop shop that does all these things, even if you're just the one taking the photos, but you have some guy that you sub it out to that's, sticks the sign in the yard or measures the house for the floor plans, that's fine. The key is just, as far as the agent is concerned, I know that I have one point of contact or one company or one website that I go to take care of all this, and I can get it all bundled together.
It's almost like a account manager vibe of I need a bunch of listing manager stuff done to get something live. I'd prefer to just talk to one person.
You've mentioned signs in the yard. Are there things that you wish a photographer would do?
So I don't know of anyone in our area that kind of bundles photography with like staging. So that might be a good opportunity, and again, even if you sub it out, but just to have that one point of contact anytime that you get a listing agreement signed, this person is going to take care of everything I need, whether it's providing furniture or just doing like a consultation, like a pre-photography consultation where you can go to the house and give the seller advice of, hey, move this, couch this way, or put some, flowers here, or let's declutter this closet,
Yeah.
I think there's an opportunity there because there's certainly people that provide that service, but I don't know of anyone that has kind of bundled that together with photography.
Staging is an interesting conversation.
Mental notes.
Yeah, sure. I don't know a lot about staging. I feel like we're in the same market in Greenville, South Carolina. I don't see a lot of requests for that. But do you do staging often, or want to do staging more?
Yeah. So I don't think it's not very common. Most agents don't do it. That's something that I did when I was taking listings. Again, I was just looking for ways to stand out. So, I could build my brand and get more opportunities. So that's one of the things that I did. I had someone, they didn't provide furniture, but they would come in and do a consultation before photos and make sure that the home photographed really well.
Okay, so this is like decluttering advice, helping them get like depersonalizing the photos and all the like that litany of things, not like taking out their furniture and putting in like designer furniture.
Correct. Yeah, this is more of like, hey, I'm going to have my designer or stager come out Wednesday, and then my photographer is going to be here Thursday. So it's someone to meet with the seller and just make sure that the home is ready for photography so that it photographs well. Because I don't know about you guys, if you've ever been in this situation, but you go out to photograph a house and it's just not ready for photos. And so the photographer is having to spend 30 minutes like coaching the seller on, hey, let's do this or do that. And it can be really frustrating. So especially if a photographer is trying to line up their day and go from shoot to shoot, that can be challenging.
That actually might be pretty fascinating because I think one of the most common complaints I hear from photographers directed toward realtors is that the houses aren't ready and they have to spend a bunch of time picking up things and decluttering to make their shot look nice. So that actually sounds like a pretty interesting synergy if somebody could figure that out.
So I want 20% of every pre-photography consultation that you guys do.
Yeah. No,
I'm verbally trademarking that right now.
Yeah, right. Obviously, there's a part of the photos that make it look great is just a great camera, a good eye, good editing. But then really at the end of the day, the house is what's being showcased. And if the house is a mess or is unattractive, the photos aren't going to look better just because they're shot with a good camera or by a professional photographer. So oftentimes, that those little touches of staging, even if it's with the owners, with their stuff, that's a really interesting problem to solve. I don't know. I haven't really thought about that very much.
Yeah, I mean, when someone's looking at a listing photo, it's just human nature. You're really looking more at the
Sure.
furniture than at the house. I
Weirdly.
mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, you're not buying the furniture, typically you're buying the house, but we tend to just look at, the furnishings and the designs and stuff like that. So
You're right on. Like there's like we all know intellectually, like you're just buying the house. None of the furniture will be there. But I can't tell you how many clients back in the day when I was working with the buyers, like they just fixate on the furniture. Oh, this looks so nice in this room. Or when I was showing houses to my mom, my mom is just she loves to cook and that sort of thing. So she's really fixated on things in the kitchen, like drawer organizers and things that are important to her. She fully knows intellectually that those don't come with a house. But at the same time, like that's what her eye is drawn to because it's important to her. And the same with furniture and all these things. It's really interesting because I think we like intellectualize it away as though that doesn't really matter that much. But it frickin' does. Like buyers, it matters to buyers what they see, even though they're not going to get any of that furniture. It's always bizarre to me.
well, I mean, we're just emotional creatures. I mean, people make buying decisions based on emotion, typically not based on logic.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a reason that builders put really nice furniture in their model homes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just you walk in and the home feels nicer, fancier, better. You're not getting the furniture, but
Yeah.
it's about the feeling that you get when you walk in the house or when you look at the photo.
So I think that brings up a good topic here. Where do photos and media kind of lie in the progression of a buying decision? Take us through kind of the mindset of a buyer. I'm sure you've had many of those conversations. How far does the photography go into the consideration?
From the buyer's perspective?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like how important is that to them?
Well, yeah. So the first sell is always selling them on scheduling a showing.
Hmm.
So the most important thing is that, because everyone is looking at real estate online nowadays. There's still some people that drive around and walk into random open houses, but even the people that go to open houses, they've typically seen all the pictures online anyway, and then they decided to go to the open house. So the better your photos are, the more showings you're going to get. And the more showings you get, the more likely it is that you're going to get an offer. So that is like one of the most important things is the photos. Obviously pricing is important and different things like that. The description is important, but I'd be willing to bet that 90% of people don't actually read the description of the house, or they don't read the whole thing. And if they do read it, it's only because they've already looked at the photos and they're interested enough to now read the description. So um, the listing photos really is your first impression. It's your opportunity to grab someone's attention. And I mean, people have short attention spans. So your first few photos have to be really, really good. Because they're scrolling through Zillow or realtor.com or whatever. And, 90% of the time they're starting on a mobile device.
Yeah.
At least, my generation they're typically looking on a mobile device. And then if they're interested enough, they might pull it up on a laptop to get to a bigger screen. But um, so you've got to keep that in mind. You've really got to capture someone's attention with the first photo, definitely the first few photos. Because if those aren't interesting enough, they're not going to look at the rest. They're not going to read the description. They're not going to schedule a showing. So, I mean, that is probably the most critical part of marketing a home for sale is the photos, because the whole purpose of the photos is to get people interested enough to schedule a showing.
I can corroborate that is where the at-bats come from. In fact, 10 years ago, I managed to, don't tell anyone / anyone except for the thousands of people that will see this. Like 10 years ago, I completely forgot to add a listing description to a property and it sold in 2 days.
I would love to do that as like a A/B test.
Like back in the day, you
It's
remember when
mysterious.
Zillow would like block, like if you put something in it, like a phone number, they would like blackball your description or whatever. And guess what? Those still sold in 4 days too. Like, I mean, back in that market. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's tons of visual storytelling.
Yeah, I would be interested in actually testing that out and seeing, how that would go without listing descriptions. I have seen where, our agents, this is getting kind of in the weeds here, but like in the MLS, you typically have different options for the remarks. You have like public remarks, you have syndicated remarks, you have different things like
Yeah.
that. And I would see some agents fill in the remarks, but not the syndicated remarks. And so some websites would show the property description, and then some websites,
Wouldn't.
like
Yeah.
realtor.com, used to pull the syndicated remarks, and it wouldn't be there at all. And I would always have to remind people, like, you've got to copy and paste and like put this in both sections. Otherwise, certain websites aren't going to show anything.
Michael, tell me a little of like what, once you take a listing, so you sit down with a client, you take a listing, they sign, you're going to be their agent. Between that moment and when it goes live in the MLS to syndicate out to the world, what are the things that have to happen between there? Like, what's the checklist there that the photographer is at least one piece of? But what are all those things that have to happen?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of photographers don't know. To them, it's just you sign the thing and then I take some photos and you throw it in the MLS. What else happens in that period?
So I think that depends on if the home is actually ready, to hit the market. Sometimes we'll get a listing agreement signed, and we know there's, a checklist of a handful of things the seller has to do to get ready. But I always
Seller
coach my agents
repairs
to
and
get,
prep stuff.
yeah,
And then,
yeah, prep. Like if they want to paint the dining room or, declutter this room, sometimes there's certain things that we need to do. Again, that comes down to like pre-photography checklists, making sure the home's, going to be presented in the best possible light. So you get the listing agreement signed, any of those pre-photography checklist items, like decluttering, tidying up, painting, repairs, anything like that. Some listing agents will recommend that you get a pre-listing home inspection. I never did that personally. I was never really a big fan of that, but some people are big on that. Um, but you definitely want to look at anything cosmetic, anything that's going to be visible during a showing, you want to take care of. Again, it's all about making sure the home photographs well. And that can include interior stuff and exterior stuff, cleaning up the yard, maybe throwing down some mulch and whatever, just getting the home ready for photography. As an option, you can include that staging and design consultation we talked about, where maybe you're bringing someone in to give the seller, some advice on things to do to get the home ready for photos. And one of the reasons that I like to use a third party for that kind of staging pre-photography advice is they get to be the bad guy, and I don't have to be the bad guy. So if the house
Oh,
smells like cat
fascinating.
because they
Yeah.
have a litter box, different things like that, they get to be the one to tell them, hey, this artwork is hideous. You need to take it down. So,
You need a pretty
I
bold
want them
person to do
to,
that. Yeah, no,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
interesting.
yep.
But if they're going to get upset at someone, I'd rather it be them and not me as the listing agent. So that pre-photography staging and design consultation. If you are bringing in actual stage furniture, obviously that would be a step. And then the media, so the photography, videography, et cetera. Um, putting the sign in the yard lockbox, depending on whether or not you're a member of NAR and you have to follow, the rules there. You can only have the sign out like a day before you're going to go active in MLS. So there are some logistical timing things there, but and then it's writing your listing description, making sure that you come up with a good description of the property that's going to catch people's interest, get them ready to schedule a showing and come out and take a look at the property. Getting the listing input into the MLS, so all the data entry there. So every MLS is different. There's certain fields that are required. Oftentimes you need room measurements, and you've got to say what type of shingles are on the roof, what type of materials are on the exterior, whether it's siding, brick, et cetera. So all the nitty gritty details about the actual physical properties of the house itself. Making sure the seller has filled out their seller's disclosure statement. Again, that's going to vary from state to state. But getting all the necessary documents, if the home was built before 1978, you need that lead-based paint disclosure. So, all those things just to get it ready, and then you actually hit the market. And, there's some strategy there as well about when to hit the market. I was always a big fan of hitting the market on like a Friday morning. I don't know if there's really any statistical truth to whether or not that was in my favor, but I always did that. I like to hit the market on a Friday, so that in my mind, people are looking on Friday trying to plan out what homes they want to go see that weekend. I never like to hit the market on like a Monday or a Tuesday. I always like to hit it just before the weekend.
What is that run up of all of those things? What is that time frame usually? Is it a week or a couple days?
It depends. We've had listing agreements that we've signed, and we know that it's going to be a couple months because the seller has a significant amount of work to
Mm.
do. But during that time, we can do internal marketing within the brokerage to try to see if we could possibly do an off-market sale if it makes sense for the seller. Oftentimes it doesn't. Oftentimes, actually getting full market exposure is what makes the most sense. But every seller has a unique situation. Maybe they would much rather find an off-market buyer than shell out the money to do the repairs that they really need to do in order to get it on the market. So sometimes it could be a lead time of several weeks or several months. We've had some actually hit the market like less than 24 hours.
Holy cow.
And again, that all comes down to the seller situation. We've had some sellers that are facing foreclosure, and for whatever reason, people are in denial and they wait until the last minute and they realize, yeah, I should probably think about selling this house before I go to auction. So we've had some pretty tight timeframes that we've had to work with before, where a seller really really needs to hit the market ASAP. And there have certainly been times where I've got a listing agreement signed, on a Thursday, and it's on the market Friday. And that's where having vendors that you work with consistently in your pocket really come in handy. Where if I've got a photographer that I send a lot of business to, and I say, hey, look, I really need a favor here. I need you to squeeze me in. Here's the situation. So it could be less than 24 hours, or it could be several months. It really just depends on the seller situation. But I think in general, as a real estate professional, you need to be able to guide your seller through the process and set expectations and be able to work with whatever their time frame is. So if they're in a hurry and they need their home listed tomorrow, your job is to figure out a way to make that work. You're kind of the quarterback, and you're coordinating everything that needs to happen behind the scenes to make that a smooth process for them. And some sellers are not in a rush and they've got things that they want to do, and now it's your job just to provide the advice on of these things that you could do. Here are the ones that you could prioritize that are going to give you the most bang for your buck, in terms of getting the home ready for market, and just kind of working on the seller's time frame. It should never be there on our time frame. If you're an agent going on a listing appointment, you can never say, hey, my process is from when we sign a listing agreement, we're on the market in exactly 8 days. It's not about your time frame, it's about the seller.
All right. Well, I have to know what's the longest you've ever had from like listing signed to on the market?
Oh gosh. That's a good question. I mean, for me personally, it was probably like 2 or 3 months. I'd have to check with our agents to see if anybody has one that took longer than that.
You have to almost do like fresh new seasonal photos between.
Yeah, you took them way back
Yeah.
then. And you also had to do some weird
Yeah.
like legal stuff. You got to take it an in-house listing and then switch it to public. It's a pain, but it happens where they get delayed.
That really depends on your local MLS and what the rules are that you
Hmm.
have to follow. Every MLS is a little bit different. Some require you to actually provide them with a copy of your listing agreement if you're getting it signed and there's a big lead time.
Yeah.
Or some just require that you are willing to provide them a copy of the listing agreement upon request, to prove the language there. But in our listing agreement, we have it built in where there's a certain period of time that they authorize it to be, brokerage exclusive listing, and there's a certain date that we plan to hit the MLS.
Yeah.
So there's some paperwork logistics there, but again, it all comes down to what's in the best interest of the seller.
Yeah.
What is their time frame? What are their needs?
Let's talk about some pain points. Moses already kind of teed this up earlier, but
I'm good at pain points.
yeah. How does availability factor into that consistency? I think there's probably a few different scenarios for different kinds of people, but is it a really big deal if you're not available, for a Tuesday afternoon shoot when the seller, like that's their only window? Or, is that a thing where I'm going to go use someone else this time, or I'll have to wait until you're
Yeah,
ready?
possibly. Yeah, depending on the seller's time frame. I mean, if you've got a listing appointment on a Tuesday and your seller's wanting to hit the market by Friday, um, I mean, the real estate agent's going to prioritize delivering for their client, the seller,
Yeah.
and making that happen for them. So, um, every once in a while they might have to use their, second string photographer if that's what it takes to get the job done. Just like with any other vendor, like a lender. If you've got a client that wants to make an offer and they need to get pre-approved and your lender's not available, you're calling that next person on your phone to get that taken care of. Because our job obviously is to deliver for the client and make sure that we get the home listed when they want it listed. So, relationships are important. I strongly advocate having like a go-to person and trying to do as much business with them as you can. That way, you have that history, that communication, you know how each other work, you get in a rhythm. And when you need a favor, maybe you can get a favor, squeezed in early if at all possible. But every once in a while, you're going to have to go with other options. That's just the nature of the business.
Yeah. I like one of the things I've heard repeatedly on the photographer side is that realtors can be like pushy because they need something the next day, and why couldn't they just figure it out earlier? But it's interesting, like when you actually understand the process where it's this chain where like you're making a sale to the listing, like to the seller, and then you've got a series of things you've got to get done before it actually goes on the market. And let's say you make that phone call to the next day, but you need the next day shoot of Wednesday. Like you said, you took the listing on Tuesday. You need the photos to be done on Wednesday so that you can get them back on Thursday, so you can get everything else done and the sign in the yard so they can go live on Friday. So it feels like this mad rush sometimes to the photographers, but if you like, it's a multi-day process that is one piece is the photographer.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly understand if the photographer's not really familiar with how it all works and the why behind it. It's not that the real estate agent is just being a jerk. Like, I want this tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's the weekends are important. That's just the nature of it. So if you're not going to be able to hit the market in time for the weekend, you might actually be, waiting until the next Friday to hit the market. The photographer might ask, well, why can't you just hit the market Saturday or Sunday or Monday? But
Yeah.
you really want to go into the market, go into the weekend with as low days on market as possible. Just psychologically, if I'm a buyer looking at a house on a Saturday and I see the days on market is 1 versus days on market is 8,
Mm.
that's just different in the buyer's mind. There's more urgency maybe to make a good offer
Mm-hmm.
if they're interested in making an offer, if it's a brand new listing. So I think it's really important to go into the weekend with as low days on market as possible. That's why I always list it on Fridays. And so if there's a delay in any, part of that chain, whether it's the getting the home, staged and ready, or the photography, or, the editing, or, getting the sign of the art, if there's any breakdown in that chain of events, it could be a delay of 1 day, but really that's a delay of 1 week if you're strategically trying to, list on a Friday, which I think a lot of people do. So, and depending on the seller situation, a week could be a big deal.
Yeah. And I think for a realtor too, like if you weren't able to get it up on Friday, would there be a shot? Like, would there be a reality where you might not get that listing?
Yeah, it's entirely possible. If the seller really needs to sell as quickly as possible and they need to feel confident that you can get it on the market Friday, if they've interviewed 3 different agents, let's say it's a Monday or a Tuesday, and they're interviewing a few people and they're in a rush to get it on the market. And, one guy says, yeah, I've got my photographer on speed dial. I can get him here tomorrow. No doubt about that. And then you're like, well, I check with my photographer and he's 4 days out, so I can get him here. You want to exude that confidence that you know what you're doing. This isn't your first rodeo. You have vendors, you have a system. Like, I can work on your time frame.
Yeah.
It's not you having to bend to my time frame. I think that's really important. It could definitely be the difference between getting the listing or not getting the listing.
Yeah. It sounds like a good philosophy for the photographers to have toward the realtors too.
Yeah, I think it's easy for the photographers to kind of miss the relationship that's happening on the other side between the agent and, the seller. It's not that you're oblivious to that happening, just the kind of pressure that's there. You may not realize as the photographer that like they have to do these photos because there's a baby and the baby is only awake these hours, and that's putting pressure on the realtor. Like, we got to get this in. And, there's like scheduling things. I feel like that comes up a lot. Scheduling is an issue, but I am curious, what are the things that can really help you as a realtor or for your realtors to stand out when you've got a trusted vendor? That vendor has to represent you. You're inviting them.
With the homeowner, you mean?
Yeah, right. Thank you. Yeah. You're inviting that vendor into the house on your behalf and representing you as an agent. You may or may not be there. What are the things you expect? And, what are the things that would really help if a photographer could getting the right attitude and mentality?
That's a great question. So, and let me preface this by saying, like, before I got into real estate, I was in the mortgage business. So I was a loan officer. And the way I looked at it is, as a mortgage lender, my job was to make the realtor look like a hero.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I got a lot of business. Is my focus was on making the realtor look good. And when a realtor refers me to a client, I look at that as I was an extension of, the realtor. Uh, Anything you do is either improving or diminishing, the realtor's reputation or standing in the eyes of their client. And any vendor should be looking at it the same way, whether it's a photographer or anybody else. So, it's the little things that should be obvious that we shouldn't have to talk about, like showing up on time, you know, being dressed professionally, having a good attitude. Those things are important. If the seller, if you say, hey, my photographer is going to be there at 3 p.m., and especially if the seller is having to like take off work, or you change the baby's nap time, or
Yeah.
take the dog for a walk, or whatever they need to do to make that happen. If you say my photographer is going to be there at 3 and they're not there until 3:20, that's a problem. And that makes the realtor look bad, not just the photographer, because now, even if they don't say it out loud, the seller's thinking, well, they, this is the photographer that my realtor chose.
Right.
So what does that say about my realtor's judgment
Yeah.
and about their relationships and their vendors, So showing up on time, preferably 5-10 minutes early, right? Being dressed professionally, those things are important.
That's
Doesn't mean
awesome.
you have to wear a suit if you're a photographer, but don't show up in pajamas.
Sure. Right.
You heard it here. You need a 3-piece suit, maybe some tails.
I'll settle for a 2-piece.
There you
Oh,
go.
okay.
Expectations aren't as high as we thought. Yeah. Where can people follow you and find you online?
Yeah, so if you want to learn more about a company, Bluefield, you can go to bluefieldgroup.com. You can also find us on, all the socials, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, just search for Bluefield Group or Bluefield Realty Group. And I also do a podcast called Real Estate Backstage, specifically targeted for real estate professionals. So you can find that at realestatebackstage.com.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thanks so much.
Cool. Thanks, guys.